record day today. All right, guys, I have 8:30, so I would hereby call to order the Escambia County Planning Board, and if you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm sure by now everyone has heard that the applicant withdrew their public hearing case for the quasi-judicial. Do we still need to open the meeting and do anything, or we just need to notate that that was withdrawn? Okay, so they're indicating, we're just notating that that case was withdrawn, and I'm not sure if it'll come back at a future date, but we'll leave that up. So with that, we'll go directly into our planning board regular meeting. Staff members, did we have proof of publication?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and does that publication meet all the legal requirements?
Yes, sir.
All right. Chair will entertain a motion to waive the reading of that legal.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. You've been previously provided the board meeting minutes for the previous meeting. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You've received the hearing package for today's meeting. Are there any questions on that? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to accept that hearing package for today's meeting, as well as the legal advertisement into evidence.
So moved.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. We will go directly into public hearings. We'll come back to our follow-up items. But this is a public hearing concerning the review of ordinance amending Chapter 5, Article 3, Section 5-3.3, subsection and infrastructure. And who will be presenting for the staff on this one? Okay. And just noted that we also do have Stacy Hayden here from ECUA. In case there's any questions that we may have, welcome to you, and thank you for coming in. All right, Allison, go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, Chairman and Board. So yeah, this is the Chapter 5 where ECUA, when they were looking at the ordinance, they needed to make some clarity because when developments, they didn't want just residential, because there was a difficulty sometimes with commercial entities and the wastewater, that they'd have to run a separate connection for every, if you had like a strip center or different developments, then you'd have to run connections for each one, which got expensive if you had to repair it. And also it wanted to make sure that it was for residential and for subdivisions as well as commercial development, because this, the way it read, it seemed more subdivision related than commercial. And our legal can chime in and any clarity if needed.
Okay.
Also told me to have, just to add in.
Horace,
That's something-
come to the microphone, please.
that's something we have, this was a request from ECUA Council, and staff, you know, we partner with ECUA, so therefore, if there's any direct questions, Mr. Stacy is here. It was straightforward. Our engineering department looked at it and blessed it. So it's just really straightforward. For any questions, it's what they're requesting, and we blessed it, and for any questions, they are here to address.
So Horace, just a quick question. It appears that this minimizes cost in the development. It's kind of a cost savings factor, so, okay. Mr. Hayden, did you have anything you wanted to add? We certainly give you that opportunity. Okay, he's just here for questions. All right. Board members, questions?
I was just going to ask, is this looking at the entity as a whole, And, I mean, then you're gonna do your calculations based on probably maximum, population of this building, whether it be commercial or mixed use or whatever it is, and then treating it as such and building a system that'll service the whole, the max. I mean, is that the idea here, as opposed to treating as individual businesses that have to deal with it on their own?
Yes, sir, that's correct, and it gives us some flexibility. The system doesn't have to be private, it just gives us the option and to work with the, any commercial development to do that.
So is the developer still, I guess, responsible for, do they have to get it from the property site to the street or to ECOA? Do they have to,
Correct, yes, sir.
whatever that takes? And ECO will be kind enough to tell them, you need this to get it to the street or whatever, kind of a force main or whatever.
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding, do you have a specific example? I'll give you some background. Right now, I live in a subdivision that has a private lift station, and we're looking at trying to upgrade that thing to meet ECOA standards to turn it over. So we're looking at 500,000 to 1.5 million for 100 homes, so that's $5,000, $15,000 per home. There's been a number of neighborhoods in Escambia County that have basically been given the gift of a private lift station by the developers as they kind of shut down their LLC and started a new one, and I'm one of those. Huntington Creek I'm in Twin Spires, Huntington Creek. I'm very familiar with Creekwood Estates, and Deerfield Estates. Those are all residential neighborhoods that were given private lift stations. So I'm very hesitant to have anything that has to do with a sewer system being private. ECOA, the A in ECOA stands for authority. You're the experts at handling sewage. Private developers, private entities, residential homeowners are not experts in this. So again, my perspective is from a lift station. Can you give an example of where you would have a private system? Would it run through a private lift station? Are you just talking the mains up to the force main? I mean, the other problem we have is we own the sewer lines under a county road, so that really complicates the issue, in my personal experience.
Yes, sir, I'll be happy to provide some more detail. So I believe the genesis for the original part of the code was to prevent private sewer systems in residential neighborhoods, just for the reason, as you mentioned, because we had some private lift stations. The developer wanted out of the picture and turned it over to the homeowners to deal with, and similar to your situation there. ECOA does not want that either. We will not allow private lift stations, a collective lift station for residential development. Grinder pumps, I want to be clear, that's a different animal altogether. We don't allow private lift stations any longer. That's in those will have to be, grandfathered or not grandfathered, but similar to your case, be upgraded to our standard. We would take them over for ownership and maintenance from that point forward. This part of the code prior to this request to change did allow for private sewer and townhome developments, just because you had some special cases there, and we didn't want to prevent development, but in that case, they would still not be allowed an ECOA lift station, but if they wanted to do some things, smaller lot size, narrow the right of way, townhomes would still be allowed to have their private sewer system, although not an ECOA lift station. When we got to looking at commercial developments, which is the reason for this requested change, an example of that would be, you have a big box store that bought a big parcel and they want to subdivide it for some out parcels. That would prevent us and the developer from having to make separate connections to our sewer system and run their own sewer main, which would be much more costly than if they just had a common sewer system that was to remain private and then go connect to our sewer system. In some cases, yes, they would have their own private grinder pump system, which is not like a larger ECOA lift station. It's kind of a step up from a private residential system. So much less of of an issue or a concern that we would have there. We would look at making sure that all these commercial entities had the rights to access that sewer system such that if one owner or developer goes out of business, then you would have the other entities able to take care of that part of the private sewer system and wouldn't, cut them out, so to speak.
What standards would apply as far as the infrastructure? Again, my example is we have a substandard lift station. Basically, it was, hey, we're gonna keep it private. It didn't have to meet the ECUA requirements per their engineering manual. And same thing, if it's a private sewage collection system, who is overseeing do ECUA standards apply? Is that gonna be written in the code? Or can they go in there and put substandard infrastructure in and then, through a service life half of what a ECUA system would have, it fails. The other issue is who would, there's the FDEP, there's the EPA, and then there's the ECUA all involved in systems like this. Who would be ultimately in charge of ensuring the safety of these systems?
Yes, sir. So we review, ECUA has delegated authority from DEP for permitting of private collection systems of this nature. So DEP gives us that authority. We review it just like DEP would with the same regulations, state statutes and everything. The more stringent regulation would apply, be it the state regulation or ECUA's regulations and standards. So we would review the lift station, the gravity sewer, and that to make sure that their materials and their details and everything are up to our standard. It is private property, therefore it does fall into the building code portioned into or folks to review. So you have essentially then two entities that would be overseeing the construction of this private commercial development.
A question for staff. Again, I know more about lift stations than I ever wanted to know. With respect to the building code, does our building code have anything in it with respect to sewage collection systems and lift stations? When I've done my research, and some of it's dated, it was the ECUAs and FDEP, and in our case, there were no as-built plans for our system. They were never submitted by the engineer of record. There were site-build plans, but no as-built. What's going to prevent that from happening here? Again, I just want clarification that the building code addresses the standards for these type systems.
Horace, come to the microphone, please.
As far as that question, we do not know if it does or not. That's something we could get addressed from the building official on that particular question that you may have, or you can talk to Mr. Tim Tolbert. He's the building the chief building inspector, and he can provide some information to you on that. I know that a lot of things changed since Huntington, Twin Spires, and Creekside. Many things changed. So hopefully it's better. I know that it's better going forward. I just cannot speak to everything that occurred on your side because I know there was some challenges. I know that. So, but again, Mr. Tim Tolbert, he can address that question. But we don't answer those questions as related to the building code. But we'll definitely reach out to him.
If I may, the lift station itself does have to adhere to DEP and ECUA standards. It does come to us for review and approval. Similar to a house connects to the gravity sewer system, it has to go through the building official and get make sure it adheres to the plumbing code. So that's what I mean by it does get reviewed by both parties. There's a portion that is under the plumbing code, under the county standards, and then there's a portion that gets permitted through ECUA and has to adhere to our standard.
So that's what I want to hear. So they can do the private, but it's got to meet your standards, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay, I think I'm maybe wrong, but I'm hoping that will prevent future issues like that, because if you have to take it over, you set the precedent for it anyway. So, you know, just like Inter-Rarity or any other of these things that, you know, it's not fair to throw it on the ECUA, say, here, it's yours now, take care of it. You know, there is a balance there, and I think in Mr. Ingwell's, it's certainly on their, you know, the other side of that equation. To me, it's like, we have a line, you know, you go through construction development and you're out. It always bothers me, I know in my own subdivision, we have retaining ponds, retention or detention. At the time that they were permitted, they were planned, the engineer's so smart to have it just so, but for some reason, the maintenance of that never really gets, you know, HOAs don't know anything about maintaining them, they have to go clean them out, and all of that is still water that gets to our big water system at some point. So I guess I hope that if this gives you more as the authority, you allow them to keep it private for the flexibility, but if something were to go awry, you're the guys that set the standard for it, so you could deal with it. That's kind of what I'm hoping is the plan.
Yes, sir, there's parts that we're able to deal with and parts that we do have to get occasionally the health department to help us out on,
Right.
for issues on private property sometimes too, so I just wanted to be clear there.
Yeah, along those lines, I'd really like assurances that's written down where it has to meet certain meet ECUA standards. I mean, is it,
Yes, sir.
I really, there can't be any wiggle room on this. It has to be very precise language so that there is no way to get around the quality of the system. So I need assurances that that is somewhere in the code or in the agreement between the ECUA and the county.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Horace, but during the DRC process, ECUA has to provide their approval letter to
Yes.
the county
Yes, sir.
on that, and if it doesn't meet their standard, then they won't give that
No,
approval
they do
letter.
not. And
Okay.
and there have been, and if we don't have that letter
It doesn't go.
indicating, we will not take it for the board for approval.
So that's,
ECUA got to provide that letter, and also we don't, based on all of the regulations as it pertains to the ECUA, but we do know this, as far as the county. Again, back in the day, there was private versus public, but now the county still do allow for private subdivisions. However, and this is the caveat, and Ms. Joy Blackman is back, she's the county engineer, and we're so glad to have her back. It'll always be, even before she got here, that it's still gotta be up to the county standards as far as the roads and the stormwater, the ponds and everything. We still private, but the county standards still got to be up
just
to
in
a certain-
case you
Yes.
have to take it over.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just lastly, again, I need the assurances that it is written down in the ECUA standards that, or in the ECUA charter that these private systems have to be built to your standards. Just because, okay, I'm gonna keep it private, so you're no longer involved, I can build it the way I want. I've seen that.
No, sir, well, for our permitting, I am directly responsible in our department to sign off on every developer system extension and single service. There's a differentiation there. Any commercial entity that connects to the ECUA collection system, I am responsible for the permitting of that. So we have our utility service agreement. They have to come in, submit engineer signed and sealed approved drawings that it adheres to our standard. We have our engineering manual that it has to adhere to. If it does not, then we don't approve it. And that's, as Mr. Morse pointed out earlier, we have a concurrency letter, or a letter that we send to the county as part of that concurrency process. And that's one part of it, to say that we have the capacity. And the other part is that plan approval. When they build everything, we inspect it. We have our own inspectors. If it's not up to our standard, we don't issue the plan approval. So yes, it does have to meet our standards, the DEP standards. We have inspectors for that to make sure that it's constructed in accordance with the plans and specs.
So how will it keep costs down? Just explain that part to me.
Okay, so, I'll take the, say we have a big parcel and we have a big box store. They want to, subdivide their property into, say, 5 or 6 parcels. Well, instead of each individual parcel having to run their own sewer system to connect to ECUA sewer system, then they can have their own, a single sewer main internal to their development, and each one of those entities connects to that one sewer main before it goes to ECUA's system. That would save a lot of cost, or in the event that it's a low-pressure system, they would have one common grinder pump to connect to instead of having 5 or 6 individual grinder pumps.
Couldn't they still do that as a ECUA system, vice private?
No, sir. Grinder pumps are considered private for us as well, so if it was an ECUA system, we would not be owning the grinder pump or the force main until it gets out to the right-of-way, public right-of-way. So, you would have 5 or 6 individual grinder pumps that, for the developer would be much more costly. I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly.
I was just trying to figure out how it'd be, you kind of answered the question, with respect to grinder pumps. I see Mr. Hemmer in the background there with Huntington Creek, and I know that a number of, about 30 of their parcels ended up with grinder pumps in their yards
Yes, sir.
for unrelated reasons.
With this action, if I'm not mistaken, will allow you the flexibility to do a more cost-effective means, but regardless, it has to come through ECUA for the blessing and allow them to build that private system that connects to you, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Whereas I think what may have occurred in the past was it met whatever standards and it was like, knock yourself out, you're on your own. And now that's coming to bear and everybody gets mad at ECUA, take care of this now. And they're like, no, it's not ours, it's yours. And so there's the rub, whether, again, I think theoretically this gives you the flexibility, but also the approval authority to make sure that what they're building is adequate.
Yes, yes.
That was the shortfall, was basically once the developer said it's private, ECUA said, okay, it's yours. And then they never came back to inspect or to ensure that the site build met, or the as-built met the site build. And again, in our case, there were no as-built plans. And so it's been kind of a mess.
Yes, sir. I understand that development, there were a lot of developments that were built to meet DEP requirements at the time, but, they didn't meet our more stringent ECUA standards at that time. So, and then our standards have changed over time because we have much more reliable lift stations now than we did, even a decade ago. We're under a consent order to reduce sanitary sewer overflows, and that's the reason that we make our lift stations more robust and more reliable. So that's, yes, it was constructed in some instances, lift stations were constructed in the past that just met the DEP standard, but not ECUA standard. So, and in that, unfortunately, we don't have control over in those instances. So, and it is unfortunate, and I feel for those residents because I talk to them, have friends, and talk to them quite often. As far as the in the instance of a grinder pump for a private commercial system, they do have to meet our ECUA minimum standards, but they also which is also encompasses DEP standards as well. So, that's about the best assurance I can give at this point. So,
Yeah, with respect to oversight, if there are issues going down the road with one of these private systems, what role does ECUA have with respect to that?
we have in our administrative code that they have to keep their collection system in good order. However, that is very similar to what we're working with the county right now, is to have a private lateral, private sewer inspection system for them. For residential connections, this wouldn't be any different. We don't have much control on private property, so that would be the county's to take a look at there.
And again, the county has really no role with respect to sewer systems, so it's, again, falls upon the ECUA, and if private property, again, that's something that could fall through the cracks. And again, it's, I have my concerns.
Yes, sir. Understand, ECUA, we handle our ECUA collection system, and unfortunately, our purview, stops at at that point, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Okay, staff, anything else? Horace, anything else you want to have? All right, Chair will entertain a motion on the ordinance.
So moved.
Motion to accept, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, one opposition. The statute passes, and we'll move on to our next item. So, okay, moving directly into action discussion items, turtle lighting ordinance discussion. Who's leading that one? Oh, good morning.
Good morning, Board. Andrew Homer, Escambia County Development Services. As you're aware, we have ordinances in place for our barrier islands concerning the sort of lighting that can be used out there and how it can be directed. This is all based on sea turtles. When they hatch, they go towards what they think is the moon. We want them to head to the Gulf and not to the road. It's in two separate sections of the code. One is in the LDC, one is in the Design Standards Manual, and the two barrier islands for these purposes are somewhat separate. The key falls solely under our purview. Santa Rosa Island is also making the changes. They're running concurrently, but those go to the Island Authority instead of the Planning Board for that recommendation. We will be bringing it to you to show you what they've done. We're all moving in the same direction. For general background on this, we do have our expert in the matter from our Natural Resources Department, Ms. Samantha Bolduck. She's here and can describe the background on this and why we're making the changes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Nice to meet you. So my name is Samantha Bolduck. I work for our Natural Resources Department here at the county, and my primary job is to help administer our Perdido Key Habitat Conservation Plan. So for those of you who don't know, we have a large number of protected and endangered species who live on Perdido Key, and to allow both development to occur but also habitat and species protection, we implemented our Habitat Conservation Plan back in 2015. So since that plan went into place, any new construction on Perdido Key that has critical habitat for either sea turtles or our beach mouse are required to utilize wildlife-friendly lighting. This ordinance would bring all properties on the key up to that same standard, so making it consistent across the island, regardless of their critical habitat or their location. That way that you don't move from a bright white property to a dimmer property back to a bright white property. This is consistent with the state's coastal construction control line program permitting, and then it is also consistent with other wildlife-friendly lighting guidelines presented by FWC. So I am here to provide any additional information or answer questions you may have.
How does this affect someone who potentially already has lighting on their property that doesn't meet the standard? Do they have to go back and bring it up to the standards?
So existing properties that have non-compliant lighting or what will be considered non-compliant lighting will have a 5-year grace period. We have been letting people know as much as possible that this ordinance is coming. This ordinance is a requirement under our Habitat Conservation Plan. So we have been letting people know as much as we can so that they can build that into their budgets, especially for our condos and our larger properties, but also so that if they have hurricane damage or other damage that needs to be done, that they can work this into those repairs. So trying to make it as predictable a process as possible.
So this is separate from the, like, the overlay plan. This is totally for conservation only, but it does the same type thing. You want uniformity across the key, across probably the other barrier island as well. It simply is the guarded lights, lowered, whatever meaning you're just trying to get across the board, everybody the same. Is that accurate?
Correct, yes.
And that's same for residential. A single family who lives out there has been there forever. They're gonna be fair warned and give them time to address it.
Correct. So that 5-year grace period is intended. So with that 5-year grace period, there's no enforcement. We can provide resources, technical assistance if we hear of funding opportunities that may help them. So in the past, the county and other partners have offered cost share retrofit programs to allow properties to voluntarily retrofit to, wildlife or turtle-friendly lighting. Again, any Gulf frontal parcel is already required to have turtle-friendly lighting per the state. So this is just catching up those properties that may be on the north side of the road or a little bit further back on the island.
You find a lot out of compliance right now?
Not very many. It's the single-family homes that maybe only have 4 or 5 lights that until now there hasn't really been a reason to change them out. Or sometimes if a property has gone back and replaced lights as others have failed, they maybe don't put in either the correct fixture or they've put in a brighter, newer fixture with the new LED technology.
Cool. Thank you.
Additional questions?
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. So being a discussion item, do we need to take any action on it at this point? Just bringing us up to speed, and I guess we'll see ordinance come through that will
That's
address these
correct.
changes.
As I stated, part of this is also in the design standards manual. We are reconstituting the committee that oversees those changes. So once we get that put together, it goes through there, it will come back to y'all. We just wanted to give you an update on where we are and that this is coming.
Do we anticipate that 5-year grace period being part of the ordinance so that people know they have some time, or the large condos have some time to be brought into compliance?
As it's currently written, that is the very last section.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, anything else, Drew?
That's it on that item.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which is the Escambia County Sector Plan Removal Ordinance discussion. And who will be leading that discussion?
I don't mind.
The big cheese himself.
Well, no, I may be cheese, I don't know how big now. Again, we're asking the board with due consideration that this item be dropped from the discussion on today. It will be coming back, definitely will be coming back, but there are some things that are yet being worked out, that are yet being looked into. The intent of the ordinance is to repeal and to replace the sector plan in its entirety. That direction is still there. That direction is still solid. That's still the intent. But again, this particular discussion, we're asking for consideration for it to be tabled at this time. But it's definitely coming back, and the intent, again, is still the same.
To repeal.
To repeal. Again, to repeal the sector plan in its entirety.
Forrest, since we're pushing this back again, can we have a little bit more specific time frame on what you see the steps happening?
Again, we are still working with our legal department, whether we'll come back for a discussion, whether we'll come back for a public ordinance, but I believe the intent is going to come back for a public ordinance with the draft ordinance.
That's correct. The intent is to come back with an ordinance. We unfortunately at this point need a little more time to do some more analysis of some of the potential issues that will come up with it. Obviously, it's a big lift to do something like this. Nothing that ever seems simple actually is. There's always those unintended consequences, and that's what we are dealing with right now. And we just need a little more time to hash that out before we bring you a draft ordinance.
What forms of public input do we have in the ordinance at this level, or are we just waiting until it comes before the planning board?
When
to
it comes
have-
before the plan, it's gonna come as a public hearing. It is gonna follow the normal, publication process.
Okay,
that-
so at
that
this
we typically
point,
do for a draft ordinance.
does the members of the public have any input to the process where you're writing it, or it just has to wait until until the planning board?
It's going to follow the normal process once it come here for review as a public ordinance.
Okay. Okay. Board members, any questions?
Does that repeal and replace, or is it repeal, period?
Repeal.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Hemmer, I know you might be here concerning that case. Did you wish to speak or say anything at this time? I know they're pulling it from the agenda, but I also know that you probably came to attend that part of the meeting, so, good morning, sir.
Good morning, thank you. Fred Hemmer, 207 East Intendencia Street. I have a little bit of cold, so I sound like this. I don't have COVID, so anyway. I understand, I found out late last night that this was going to be the case, and obviously it's disappointing. We're very frustrated in that, you know, this is the largest, our area is the largest community in the plans in the county. And you know, we got our first development order for 316 lots well over a year ago, and we did not pursue that. We were working on our next phase, but we needed to get this sector plan issue resolved before we can go forward as part of our master plan. We've been working in the background for several years with our plans. We've engaged Dewberry. We're working with ECUA on master plans for bringing direct force main up to that area. So that whole area will have sewer. We've been talking about schools. We've been talking about a number of things. You know, we signed the deal with the county on the road agreements for all the interior roads. So we didn't want to do this another infill urban sprawl type of community. We want this planned and planned right. And we need to know what the sector plan issue is going to be, because there's a lot of issues with that. We can still do our plan with the sector plan in place. That's not a problem. You know, we can do that. But we're at the point where we're working on the master plan for the whole 1,500 acres. There's 5,000 units, you know, that is zoned for and approved for right now. So we need to complete the planning process. We're not going to be the irresponsible developer who goes forward without the development plans in place. So I just encourage you all and, you know, the planning department and staff, when we do get whatever needs to be resolved, that we work on it quickly. We've communicated to Allison Rogers that we've offered Will Dunaway time to help the county if there's any legal issues or things like that need to be resolved. We would be glad to help with that. So anyway, that's what I have to say if you have any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Back to my elusive question. Do we have a time frame? Next month, 2 months, 6 months? What are you thinking?
We will be moving as expeditiously as we possibly can.
It's a very political answer.
And we do appreciate Mr. Hemmer concerns, and we are well aware of his concerns. Again, our legal department, he mentioned the county attorney's office, Will Dunaway, Ms. Bush, Matt. So his concerns are not going off the rail. We hear him completely, and we are moving. We will be moving as expeditiously as we possibly can.
All right, very good.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say, and on the record, you know, it sounded like we have a developer who's got good intentions, and we'll never hear about that again.
Right.
Because the time when we have public forum, it'll be why they're simply greedy and after all the typical things we hear. And I think as the county, we should do whatever we can to further incentivize developers to have that type of foresight, and especially on a large subdivision scale like that, that if they are construed to be working with those people who are such proponents of the sector plan, to meet some happy medium would be just a beautiful thing. I know it's a little naive and optimistic of me to think of such, but we should do whatever we can to help them in the process. Because not only is it financially painful for them, I'm sure, to prolong this event, if it's good press, if it's anything, we should, I don't know what we can do, but help them in any shape, form, or fashion. And equally, for those who aren't as astute in developing, should be on the opposite side of that, should be discouraged. But this should be rewarded in some shape or form, in my opinion.
I would agree. All right, anyone else? Questions, comments? Drew, is that everything? Yeah.
That's it for this issue.
All right. All right. We are all hoping that you do it quickly, so. All right, let's move into public forum. Anyone that wishes to speak for public forum today? All right, hearing none, we'll close that. Horace, Director's Review.
Just so that you know, at the last planning board meeting, we had several rezoning cases that you made a recommendation for denial. And you'd like to know the update, the board upheld all three. One item was pulled, but the remaining rezoning cases that y'all made recommendation for denial, the board upheld those recommendations.
All right, very good. Do we have,
Horace, on, there was one that we approved on, 07, that they denied. What was their reasoning for denial?
Which one is that?
This is the
Tower
Hill Ridge Road. The, MDU, I think it was, going to medium density.
Yes, and, yeah, Drew, do you remember that one? I'm trying to
Yes.
remember, I'm trying to remember the.
So
specific
this is the
thoughts.
one on Tower Ridge. It was, I don't want to say directly across the street. It's a little north, but across the street from Antietam. That's the one. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's to the northeast of Antietam subdivision. There was quite a bit of public input. The board did vote to deny that one.
So that was overturned? Yes, on that one, they did overturn the decision for approval.
okay,
And if you recall, and that was a split vote anyway, so it wasn't a unanimous decision. Recommendation.
any updates on, we'll go back to the agenda item of follow-up or 6-month outlook. We obviously know the sector plan issue is coming, but any other large things that we should be on the lookout for?
And as Drew stated earlier, we are in the process and with our county engineer to bring back the PAC, the advisory committee, where that board basically, that committee take a look at the technical standards of the land development code with the DSM, and basically we are in the process of bringing that back to fruition. Certain items will have to come back to the planning board, certain items will not, based upon the charter of the DSM. So that is in the process, dealing with technical issues from the land development code.
Typically, the members of that advisory board are professionals, like engineers and surveyors and things like that, that have
Engineers,
professional.
surveyors from the environmental community, yes, very, very professional, technical,
Right, okay,
people, yes.
The issues coming before that board are going to be those that the board has been told to look into.
right,
It's not a self-generated thing. It's what the committee's directed to look into.
gotcha,
Those very specific items.
gotcha, okay. All right, anyone have anything else for the planning board? All right, well then, we are adjourned. 9:14, it might be a new record.
October 4th? How bad is October 4th, and how bad is that rezoning day?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Only 2 rezonings.
2 rezonings. All right, October 4th. Okay. And please make sure that you get back to Rachel, whether you can make that meeting or not, when she sends out her request, so. All right, thank you, everyone.